an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood. Episode 57, Eternal Leave. In this episode, so much goes wrong. And a lot of it works out, but a pretty big part of it doesn't. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. So, kiddos, this is a big one. Huh? Y'all, I said, oh shit, so many times while I was watching this. Earlier, before I think I even started the series, or it may have been just in the really early days where I was on episode 3, Max got in touch and asked if he could make every episode a voyeur episode, which are the ones where you guys get to watch me watch the episode. And there was just no way. By the time he asked me, I had already gotten everything booked in after so there was no way to fit it in. But there are episodes like this where I'm I can understand why people would kind of enjoy watching me watch a thing. And I am low-key considering just doing that with maybe the last 5 episodes or so, if I'm able to, which I'm not always able to do. But I did when I covered The Haunting of Hill House, which Candace commissioned, I did a voyeur for those episodes after episode 1, I think, because I couldn't handle watching them alone because they were incredibly scary to me. And also because watching on my main television out in the living room, it was really hard to see because it's a dark show. So it was 2 advantages to watching it from my computer with a kind of audience, and it kept me from completely losing my mind. This won't necessarily have that kind of advantage because with Hill House, I felt I kind of had to watch it that way for my own sanity, and I don't have to watch this way, but I might just do it for fun. We'll see. All this to say, this episode just goes a bunch of places that I wasn't expecting. Lots of different places. So we start out the episode with another masked figure running through the tunnels underneath the city. This is Lan Fan catching up, and she overhears one of the soldiers talking about how the Fuhrer is back. He destroyed a tank, and all these dudes are fuck yeah, fuck those traitors. We're gonna get this shit together and take them down once and for all. And Lan Fan understandably is oh shit, the Fuhrer is here. What am I gonna do now? So we cut back to the Fuhrer, who has not yet begun his fight with Fu. And Fu, I won't, he has a good run here. He gives this man something to think about. The Fuhrer is aware he has been in a fight after. But things still just don't go quite the way that he was expecting. So we have just a reminder that they're about to fight. We don't even have the fight start. When we then cut over to General Armstrong and Izumi, who are looking down at the superior officer, whose name I can't remember, or I don't even know if we know it, that Izumi caught trying to get this immortal soldiers to attack the other guys. And I love the animation of the two of them. They have the thing going on where there's a mask over their eyes in a way, so it's just dark, and their actual eyes are these like glowing white circles, and there's a red outline to their bodies with a sort of like heat haze coming off of it and very thin wisps of smoke, so that it's just, you know, meant to convey that both of them are so angry that they are about to hit the fucking ceiling. And then when the camera zooms in, they each have a vein like ticking in their face. And all I could think at this moment was that I had been saying I shipped General Armstrong and Hawkeye, and then I was sort of like, should I take that back? Should it be Izumi that I am shipping with General Armstrong? Like, don't get me wrong, I love you, Sig, but obviously I have to ship you with fucking Major Armstrong. I mean, my hands are tied on that one. I feel like that's practically canon based on the animation. So, I don't know. I feel like maybe we could have a pretty successful, like, 1-to-1 there. So, anyway, what it turns out they're doing is they're making this man confess to the overall plan in front of some of the other soldiers so that those dudes finally are aware what the fuck was being asked of them. And Izumi is like, so you were willing to sacrifice your own country and all of the people in it to enslave humanity and become immortal. And I take it Fuhrer Bradley is aware of these plans, and he says he was created to lead this country to that purpose. And again, evidently, it is just not common knowledge yet what the deal is with the Fuhrer. So these two aren't just asking the question for the benefit of the soldiers in the room. They're genuinely asking. And the soldiers are startled by this in a way, at least, that Izumi and the Armstrongs and Sid are not, because they have their own information they're working with. And then this guy does something truly fucking banana pants and tries to defend what he is talking about. And this is one of those things where, like, I understand the urge to defend yourself in general. But you have to know that the circumstances of your capture here are not favorable to you trying to spin what is happening here, right? And I suppose when a man is faced with a situation like this and feels like the likelihood that he is going to be executed is pretty high anyway, he just decides to try whatever. And I can respect that to a point. You know, you gotta try. But what he says here, I am going to read this pretty much verbatim. We're creating a world without war. To which Izumi says, you just have to murder the world first. And he gets mad and says it wouldn't die, it would be reborn. Alchemists talk about reconstruction. We wouldn't be murdering them. They would be given eternal life while dwelling inside us. Don't you see? We would bring the world together as one. As the few chosen of Amestris, we will bring unity to the entire country. And this dude genuinely sounds like he kind of believes this. This is the sort of thing that, like, what I am imagining here is that there was a time when he knew better. It was just so long ago now, and he has been so greedy for this that he has managed to talk himself into thinking what he's saying is true. That's how I'm approaching this. So, anyway, Izumi, who has heard quite enough, gives him the fucking chancla across the face, which, that is exactly what the fuck this man deserves. That was so appropriate. It's not even a slap or a punch. It is, she took her shoe off to slap him with it. And there is something about that feels extra humiliating. Like, she didn't even want to get her hands dirty. You know? It's just... I hate this man. The whole way that he's trying to act like we're going to be doing you a favor. You're going to be giving them eternal life trapped inside your body. And you're out here really trying to say that like you're doing them a favor? Does that sound like something you would enjoy, sir? Just putting it out there, wondering if you were going to be trapped inside somebody's body for all of eternity while they lived forever, would you enjoy being the one inside? I'm just asking questions here. In the chat, B. Moore says there's an 8-minute or so collection of bloopers you ought to watch once the series ends. You could do a short voyeur of that and or the openings as a fun bookend. That's an interesting idea. I'm always a fan of bloopers. Damien says, or both. I'd pay for both. It's not really an issue of that. It's just because I can't actually schedule that in properly. It would be something that if I did it, it would probably be like at the last second, I would just put a link and be like, hey guys, by the way, I have this like half hour to watch this, so I'm doing it now. But anyway, okay. So yeah, she slaps him. It's everything. And then she turns to the soldiers and is like, yeah, so I feel like that pretty much speaks for itself. And I was actually kind of gratified. It was annoying, but I also thought it was realistic. I was watching these guys, like, obviously, they're going to have seen this and immediately go, oh yeah, fuck these dudes. But no, these soldiers have to be, like, convinced. And I just forget about the ingrained habit of following orders. And one of them even says, like, I've been a soldier my entire life, and going against the orders I've been given just feels really wrong to me. And it's very easy to sort of like to dismiss how silly that is. But I think that it's a lot more of a reality for many of us than we like to imagine it is. And, you know, it's not necessarily the same thing as like taking orders, but there are so many things that people get revealed on as being like, for example, a lot of religions, people will grow up being taught a really like intolerant or fucked up version of a religion. And they are raised so steeped in it that even once they begin to see the seams of it, find out that certain people they believed in are corrupt, or discover like abuses that are happening or being like turned a blind eye to because of like gender role beliefs. Even when you start to see that, it can be really hard to let go of this thing that up to your discoveries has represented good, has represented a community full of people that you believed were trying to do the right thing, that you trusted. And letting go of that concept, even when all the evidence in your face is pointing to the fact that this isn't what it looked like and it never was, it can be really, really difficult. You know, I mean, even like silly things talking about, for example, I always turn to lately the example of Harry Potter. Like, there are a lot of problematic things in Harry Potter, just in the text. And then we have JK, you know, liking some transphobic tweets, and we're giving her the benefit of the doubt initially that it was a mistake. It takes so much for her to eventually convince us, no, I'm really a piece of shit. No, genuinely. And like, if you go back and look at my work with a more critical eye, you'll see it. I've been a piece of shit. It's just, you know, been couched in a lot of things that feel very like, oh, tolerance. So I've been able to fool you on a lot of things. And that is not to say that there is no value in a thing. It is simply a dangerous place to be where you start to put somebody on a pedestal. And it's hard to not put people on pedestals that are your superiors in certain ways. So like these soldiers having to take a moment and be convinced that the right thing to do is to not follow orders made a lot of sense to me, even though I wanted to reach through the fucking screen and slap them. And in the midst of them talking about this fucking guy on his knees is telling them, you have to, like, you're soldiers and you have to do this. And if you stick to the plan and do what you're told, I'll put in a good word. And as the queen she is, Izumi slaps him across the face again. I really wanted to be inside General Armstrong's head for that, because I get the feeling General Armstrong would have punched this man if Izumi hadn't done it so quickly. And I can't help but wonder if Armstrong was like, good for her. Yes, exactly. Or if she was like, damn it, I wanted to do that. She jumped me. But anyway, this is when she says, you have to know what these guys are actually up to. You're hearing it with your own ears and seeing that they are not people to have faith in. And if you don't have faith in them and you just continue doing what you're told, that's not loyalty. That's mindless self-deception. I don't know if that's exactly how it goes in the original, if that's just how the translation was done. But mindless self-deception is the that is the sermon of the day. Because, that is what it is. And that's the part that's so fucking hard. When people have fallen for something and they keep tricking themselves into keeping falling for it. I know that doesn't really work, but it's one thing. And this is why presenting folks who have really problematic backward beliefs with evidence that their opinion on something is actually not an opinion, they are just straight up denying scientific fact, it isn't actually helpful, because it isn't about what they really believe. It is about what they are willing to lie to themselves about and what they want to be able to believe. Very different situation. So if you aren't, like, if you don't want to believe something, you can just fucking train yourself to ignore anything that doesn't fit. And a lot of folks just straight up don't want to believe certain things because, in my opinion, if you start to question one thing, then you begin to question others, and pretty soon the entire house of cards starts to completely fall. And people are afraid of that. And it's so cliche, but I mean, I am not above that. I do this as well. And I won't lie, there have been times where I look back and I realize that I said out loud, I don't want to believe that. One of the moments actually got caught on a podcast episode for the broadcast. And I actually had pulled the broadcast down because I feel like it does not represent any longer a lot of the views I have on certain things. But I was talking to somebody about the concept of like America not only targeting Black people for imprisonment for free labor, but also to rob them of their voting rights. And this was way before, this was probably at this point, like 6 or 7 years ago. And I put that together and I said that and then stopped and said, I don't want to believe that. And I think about it and go, I just cringe because it's just how it works. And I don't want to admit that I am somebody that would resist purely because the reality is unpleasant. I want to believe that I am somebody who will just look at the facts straight up and be like, oh, there's the evidence. Yes. But even me, I got there eventually. And even as I said, I don't want to believe it, I knew. The fact that I said it out loud indicates that I was like already starting to realize. But I still said it. And it's just we're like this, man. We want things to be a way. And you can deceive yourself into believing almost anything if you decide to bury your head in the sand enough. And it's part of why people stay in relationships where a person's like clearly cheating on them and they manage to make themselves not see it. And afterwards they act like they didn't know, but then you talk to them like years later and they are like, no, I kind of did know. It takes time to like look back and realize I was lying to myself. I knew. But anyway, I just find that the concept of like self-deception really compelling because it's something that I have experienced and I know how that can be. But there also is like a line for me where if enough evidence piles up, I will be pushed towards being like, I guess that is true. And some people can manage it so much more for so much longer. And it's just wild how afraid you have to be of anything changing in order to refuse to see reality to that degree. You know, that indicates to me a kind of fear that I don't really understand. And it's just not that complicated. It's just all about wanting to maintain your position and your privilege that you're used to. But still, as much as it is simple, I still don't really get it, you know, because I can't wrap my head around wanting to keep that at the expense of everyone else. That's the part that just completely short circuits for me. Damien says, people find comfort in things they think they know. It can be hard to admit when something you've believed is wrong. And that's the other thing, is admitting that you've been wrong about stuff takes a kind of humility that is not easy, especially if you have been loud about how wrong you are. And everybody has sort of started to take a certain attitude with you. It can feel like you can't change your position because it's losing face. And that's the part that I think can be such a driving force. And there's a poem that was so amazing. I'm trying to remember. It came from, I think, Parable of the Talents. And she wrote, you hear a thing and you repeat it. You defend the thing because you said it. You believe the thing because to deny it after you said it would be too embarrassing. And on until you believe it. Like, essentially, it's all about your ego and defending something simply because you can't bear to back down, that eventually evolves into you taking a real stand and believing in something that you have to know was never true. And you repeated it without even really thinking about it. And that was the part that you were embarrassed by, is that somebody called you out for not thinking it through and you didn't like being called out for it. So anyway, I recommend reading Parable of the Talents and Parable of the Sower, but also I don't recommend it because it will be extremely depressing in our current situation because that shit is way too on the nose. So just watch out for that. But if you do, I did cover them for Spoil Me. It was pretty early. I think it might have been the very first thing I was ever commissioned to cover, actually, now that I stop and think about it. All right, so I gotta get back on track here, kids. So yeah, these soldiers all eventually are told, like, come on, guys, you have to know that if you keep on pretending to buy into this, you're going to die in shame. You've got to make a choice here to do the right thing. And it's going to hurt to turn your back on something that's been real for you this whole time. But are you going to want to die knowing that you just like ignored the truth? Is that better? And finally, these dudes are like, okay. And they rip their like uniforms apart and take their hats off and take their little like buttons off of their lapels and whatnot and drop them in front of this dude. And he says, consider this our retirement. And the guy is very sad and crumples. Now, this is the thing that I didn't catch, and I don't know if anybody can help me with this. What do they do with this guy? We have the phone that General Armstrong uses to call in and find out what the status is of everything. And he tells her, essentially, the Fuhrer is here and he has fucked us right up. It looks like the Central guys are starting to like regroup and regain their confidence. And this dude is still cowering on the floor in front of them. And I can't remember if they just like take him into custody, lock him in a room. What do they do? In the midst of all of this, they are looking back down this stairwell. And Izumi says, if we go down far enough, I can dig us an escape tunnel. And General Armstrong is like, escape, huh? And Izumi says something like, no offense, but you really do look like you need a break. And Olivia, she doesn't really like contradict her, but she doesn't say anything at all. And then later on, when Izumi brings this up about escaping again, finally she's like, yeah, so about that. I'm not doing that. Definitely not. And her brother also is like, yeah, we're part of this. We're staying for sure. And all the other soldiers are on the same page as them. As they are, like, the camera follows down that stairwell into the tunnels below. And we wind up catching up with Ed and Scar and everybody. And as they're reaching the end of this long hallway, Ed says something about how his wounds are hurting. They're like aching more, and that he can sense they're coming to the center of everything. And they walk in, and here's this gold-toothed man in a transmutation circle in the middle of the floor. And when they're like, who the fuck are you? He says, I'm the one who created King Bradley. And it was funny because I realized all of a sudden, I know who this guy is from the gold tooth because I like watched Memories, but nobody else has that information. They didn't watch Memories the way that I did. So for a second I was like, guys, the glasses, the gold tooth, how do you not recognize this dude? And then when I stopped and thought about it, I was like, oh, right. They didn't get like dream sequences and shit. So anyway, I don't know if we get this dude's name right here, but he is like, his eyes, his like pupils, it's really weird because I want to say the irises of his eyes, but they're so small, they don't even really look like irises. They look like straight up pupils by themselves. They are facing different directions in his face in a way that I couldn't tell if it was supposed to indicate like, oh, guess how crazy he is. His eyes are nuts too, which, you know, that's one of those things that like was a very common shorthand animation wise for a long time. And now I'm just kind of like, ooh, that's problematic. But he hears Roy and says, oh shit, I thought you were at the radio station, but you've just come down here. I can't tell you how much trouble you've saved me, Colonel Mustang. And I'm assuming that it's because Mustang is the head of part of the resistance, and he thinks if he cuts down Mustang, that will end everything. And while I understand that in theory, nobody out there in the streets has seen Mustang in a minute, and they're all still very much fighting. So I don't know if that would actually work or not. I just think he's a little bit too confident. That would help. Damien says, I think that's what they do. Just leave him with some soldiers. He's listed as incarcerated on the wiki. Okay, so I didn't miss anything because he eventually is just not there, and the soldiers look like they came with our group, even though we don't see him again. So maybe it's just supposed to be like some of them came and the rest were left with him. Damien says he's literally just called Goldtooth Doctor / Man or Alchemist Doctor. No name for creepy dude. Wild. I mean, part of me likes that because sometimes giving a thing a name, there are like, for example, in Mistborn, eventually there's a character named Ruin, and I was into it. I liked that name a lot. But sometimes things will be named shit that you're just kind of like, really? Like, not for nothing, but Fuhrer King Bradley is one of them. I don't know what that was, but that was a bad decision. Somebody fucked up. That could have been a much more intimidating name, and instead it was nonsense. This dude just not having one, I don't know, that feels right to me. Like, he's been in the midst of everything, but nobody has ever actually seemed to have mentioned him specifically. So he feels like the guy that just flies under the radar and manages to get away with a lot because he's never quite powerful enough to be like super threatening in a real way. But he's also not totally disposable. So he just slides on through like those contestants on Great British Bake Off. Once you get to about like 5 or 6 people remaining, there's always one in that group that you're like, why the fuck are they still here? They suck. But they're still there because there was somebody who sucked more every week. Even though they do blow, it's just the timing of how bad they would blow was just right so that here they still are. And that's how I'm thinking of this guy. However, he could also just be fucking the complete mastermind behind everything. And considering that, like, I've been giving all of the credit for that to Father, it never really, like, occurred to me to wonder if Father had gotten a human being completely won over to his cause in a more practical way. Because we know that there are so many leaders in the military who were clearly, like, on his side, but they were promised something, and this guy doesn't mention that promise. Well, that's not true, but he doesn't feel like the vibe I'm getting off of him is just like, I just want to do this thing. I want to see what happens. It doesn't even feel like it's about, I just want to live forever. It's so much simpler than that. Just straight up, let's do it. See what it does. And I don't know. I guess I just never stopped to think about, like, who would initially have made the link with the military from the beginning. But I don't know. Maybe that's not even how it went. Like, we just don't even know. I don't know why I'm even theorizing about this. Anyway, this is when he calls to his guys to come down and get this dude out of his hair. And all of a sudden, 5 very muscular men drop out of the ceiling. And it turns out that these are all of the young men who were potentially going to become King Bradley. And were trained from birth to fight, to strategize. But not all of them were able to withstand the transformation. And so these dudes are like, just kind of, they are more purposeful than the other mannequins. They aren't as like, you know, brains. They're fighting much more consciously and deliberately. But they also are not in control of their own consciousness the way that a person would be. So, yeah, these dudes each have a sword, and they are coming for everybody with energy. And, y'all, I could not stop laughing. There is a spot where they jump in and begin attacking everybody. And we see Ed fending them off with, like, his knife on his arm. We see Scar just starting to wrestle one. And then we see Roy trying to snap his fingers, and the guy just kicks his hand and stops him. And I don't know why, but that shit was just so insulting. So as this fight begins, we start to jump around and we go to the stairwell where what's-his-face is like holding everybody back with that one giant machine gun. Then we've got the fight with the Fuhrer, and both Greed and Fu are ganging up on him. Meanwhile, Buccaneer is like coming to his feet. He's got a sword plunged through his stomach. Reminder, the Fuhrer's sword remains. And he stands up and sees the Fuhrer is unfazed. He is just continuing to fight, and there's still not a scratch on him. And he's like, I can't. I gotta get this guy. So, this three-way fight is so funny because I thought Greed was going to really be able to do more. And he gets kind of knocked out of this whole like situation earlier than I was expecting. Eventually, it's just the Fuhrer and Fu. And he almost disarms him. He comes so close, man. I got real worried for a second. And he finally slashes Fu in the forehead. And what they do is they have Fu's headband come flying off. And it looks like he just got the headband. And then a moment later, it spurts blood. And it's just like that cut was so sharp. Which is the sort of thing that I remember as a kid seeing this in cartoons and thinking it was like a huge exaggeration. And then I actually got a cut or two like this, you know, something that's like incredible, maybe even a paper cut. You'll feel it and you'll look and you won't see anything. And then a few seconds later, oh, there's the blood. But for a second, you're almost like, did I even cut myself? It feels like I did. I don't even see anything. So this is when Bradley has a line that I actually thought was pretty good. I am embarrassed to like be impressed by him, but low-key, it's impressive how quickly you move. Considering your age, you're even older than I am. However, this is as old as you're going to get. And I just truly was kind of like, that's a pretty badass line. I'm not even mad about it. And he gets a direct hit on Fu, but it isn't enough to just kill him outright. It's just a pretty like severe injury. He's about to sweep down on Fu, and Ling takes his body back and grabs him out from underneath the Fuhrer and rescues him. And I really do enjoy that inside Greed is like, you need to ask me before you take over. And I'm like, why though? It doesn't look like he needs to. It looks like he just kind of do what he wants. So, just saying. And Fu is trying to tell him, just let go of me. I'm not worth it. And Ling, this is when he does his whole like, a king is nothing without his people. Do you want me to be like him? He is about to sacrifice his entire nation in order to get something for himself. I'm never going to be like that. And I'm not just giving up on you either. I'll never become the monster that he is. And when he says this, we get a moment of inside his head and Greed not saying anything and having no expression. Like Greed is actually genuinely very thoughtful here. And I'm not really sure what to think because obviously they wind up sort of in concert as this scene goes on eventually. But Ling is sort of like... So, those of you who have read Cradle, I feel like I may have made this comparison already. But Lyndon is actually giving me Ling vibes a little bit. In that this writer has figured out a way to have somebody be greedy in their way, but in a way that isn't inherently negative, which is a pretty tricky thing to portray. So, like, the way that Ling and Greed get along actually makes sense because he wants power. He genuinely does. But he wants it because he believes very fiercely in protecting people and thinks that's the way to do it, and that he has, like, the responsibility to do it as well. And it's just interesting to see how he could become linked with Greed in a way that is not inherently negative. And it just made me think sort of Lyndon and his eventual path and the kind of Madra that he, like, winds up connecting with, and just how unusual it is, you know? Anyway, it's clear in this moment that Greed is sort of going, maybe this kid is worth more than I was thinking. And later on, when we see, like, the moment where Fu is about to really get got, both him and Greed are yelling no, and their faces are matching. They are completely aligned over one another in this, like, it's sort of like the Venn diagram of who they are becomes a full circle, you know? So Ling is yelling at Fu, "Don't be stupid. Of course I'm going to care about you." Fu looks down and he sees all of this blood pouring out. And he's like, "Yeah, man, I do need to rest now that you mentioned it." And he gets the drop on Ling and smashes him in the back of the head as he flies off and tells Greed, "Protect the young lord." And I love it. Greed actually, like, listens to the orders of Fu and engages his armor as Fu runs away. And Fu says this old servant has no choice but to offer his retirement. And he soars through the air with a ripping open of his shirt and pulls the pins on 4 grenades that he has strapped around his waist. And I'm watching this going, oh, damn. He goes flying through the air, yelling, "I'm going to take this bastard down with me." He grabs the Führer by the fucking hair. And I'm thinking, oh, that's it. Shit. Good for you. Nope. We get another one of those pale slice marks in the air. And then the camera pulls to the side and we see the wicks of each of these, like, sticks of dynamite sitting on the Führer's blade, having been cut neatly off so that they cannot ignite the bombs themselves. And in cutting the tops of those off, the Führer cut Ling through the guts. And y'all, I had such a moment, you guys. I was, like, super impressed, of course, but also, oh my God, for real? And all of this blood begins to pour out of Fu, and he's thinking, I can't believe it. I was even ready to sacrifice myself, and I couldn't get a scratch on him. And as he's dropping to the ground, he's thinking, "Young Lord, please forgive my shameful death." And then, so many surprises right in a row, y'all. All of a sudden, there is a blade through King Bradley's guts. And it's Buccaneer who says, "You may have these, like, badass eyes that see a lot of stuff, but you can't dodge an attack that you couldn't see coming." And Buccaneer has somehow snuck up behind Fu and gotten to the Führer through Fu's body, impaled Fu to the point that the blade goes right through and also impales the Führer himself. And this is one of those things that I am completely okay with, but I also can't imagine not seeing Buccaneer coming at you. This guy is humongous and Fu is quite small. So the idea that he was somehow hidden from view, I am not entirely sure how that's supposed to have worked, but it doesn't really matter. I'm fine with it. I really am. And Buccaneer says to Fu, maybe you're going to hell, but you're not going alone. You'll have my company on the way down. And Fu thanks him and is genuinely like grateful that his death wasn't completely meaningless and useless. So the Führer pulls away and kicks them off him. And as he does, he turns around and here comes Greedling. And they slash his weapon in half. And a blade goes right through his head. It's like piercing his eye is the way it looks to me. And I don't know if this is supposed to be the actual death of King Bradley, because like we know how much it takes for these guys to actually die. So I can't tell how like direct a hit this actually is because of the way he's facing the camera. It may just be a graze that looks like a direct hit from the angle that we're watching. But the way that the blood seems to be coming out of a concentrated area right at his eye socket makes it look to me like that is where he connected. I don't know. This is when Lan Fan finally makes her way to the roof and she sees her grandfather dropping to the ground dead. And I really did feel for Lan Fan to have, like, just walk in as he dies and doubtless wonder to herself if she had gotten there, like, 5 minutes earlier, maybe he wouldn't have died. That would haunt me forever, you know? So we go then to Al, Henkel, Yoki, and Marco, and they're trying to find a way to get underground again. They're running down an alley. And I kept thinking about, because the sound effect that they have for when Al is running is this very sort of light chink, 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 chink in the show, like sound effects. But I just kept thinking about what it would actually sound like for a guy this size, made of only metal, running, what it would sound like. Because the temptation in my head is to give the sound effect of like, because all I have to like associate with somebody this big and made of metal are robots in media, you know? And so they always have a sort of sound effect to indicate gears and parts moving inside. But Al doesn't have that. He's powered magically. So it would just be like the movement of the metal and the metal hitting the stone, which has to sound fucking insane. Like, if you don't know who Al is and you're just an alley away and you hear him running, what do you even begin to imagine is going on? I have to assume that you think it's like, it's going to be too soft and spread out in rhythm to be something like a jackhammer. But I think you'd have to assume it was some kind of construction equipment. Because otherwise, like, what do you even, you know? But anyway, I just wanted to mention that because it distracted me for a moment. So they stop and look at the horizon. They see the smoke rising from Central. And then we cut to the fight between all of the remaining men and our group. And they're fighting pretty goddamn well. I will say that for them. These guys are hard to keep down, is the problem. But Roy and Hawkeye wind up back to back at one point, and they almost like take out each other. And it looks like she's about to actually do it because she pulls her triggers. But it turns out there are just guys flanking him, and she reprimands him for always leaving his back open. And he says something about how I just do that to give you something to do. So fucking Creepface is over here, writing something on the ground, looking very eager. And we cut from him to Izumi talking with General Armstrong about the price of transmutation. And this is when Izumi tells her what exactly she sacrificed. And then the fact that she found out it actually isn't even possible to do human transmutation. And so she like sacrificed all of this for nothing. And at this point, there is this like big sort of, I'm trying to think what the word is. There is a sort of wave that goes through the city as the transmutation circles underneath the building begin to connect. And that is when Izumi is like, yeah, see, okay, so we need to get the fuck out of here. And she begins to theorize about ways that they can get out. And that is when General Armstrong is like, yeah, we're not leaving. There's also an interesting moment where Izumi is asking General Armstrong if there's anybody that she would give anything to see and talk to one more time, somebody that died. And Olivier is like, as soldiers, we focus much more on who is still here to keep alive. We don't really cling to like people from our past because we understand how final that is. But then she talks about here the attitude that Ed had when she kept asking him for information and he kept repeating, I can't tell you that. And her understanding that he was like incredibly desperate, but he also wasn't just a pawn of the military in that moment. And she says that he was clearly willing to pay any price to protect the things he loved. And Izumi says he always was very stubborn. And Olivier says, I'd be lying to tell you that I wasn't moved when I looked into his eyes. But I also wonder if he can lead us through this fight without his naivete burying us. And I thought that that was sort of an interesting moment for her. I don't really know what, because obviously his naivete is a thing, but I'm not really sure what examples she has seen or if she's just assuming because of his age, which that's not wrong, to be honest, you know. But is there anything that he did that feels particularly foolish to her that he like kind of maybe just got through from luck? Or I was just sort of wondering because she says that so specifically and I was like, why do you feel that way about him? So anyway, the beginnings of the actual transmutation circle, I thought it was going to be a little bit more of a big deal to get it rolling. And it turns out Goldtooth can just kind of do it on his own. So he summons back these men to him and they stand around him as he begins to activate the circle. And these dudes are, I guess, just fuel for it. They stand in, because it has to be 5 points, right? And it takes a little while because as they activate, Ed is going, wait, what the fuck are you doing? And Goldtooth is like, you're a smart kid. What do you know about how many like laboratories there are in the city? And Ed starts to say 4 and then stops and is like, oh no, there's a 5th one. And all of a sudden he puts it together that there have to be 5 and that those are set up in a transmutation circle inside the city. So I'm thinking we're going to activate like this giant one and that's going to be our big main event. And it is, I think. But apparently this first one has to happen. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe this guy's just, I don't know. I don't know how linked he is to what it is Father's trying to do. But all of them are connected by these tunnels. And so he begins to hit each of them, and this like energy starts to come out of them. The light that goes crackling upward out of the circles, I was sort of wondering if it was going to go right through the ground and pierce the actual like stone of the streets and stuff. It doesn't do that. However, the animals, including Henkel, who apparently has just got his animal senses, all start reacting very, very strongly. And it's interesting to me that it's supposed to be like the initial impact, of all of these activations at once. The humans feel that. Everybody sort of stops because things actually physically shake. But as the power continues to grow, everyone who isn't like animal seems to kind of go, oh, okay, it's over. And it's only the animals that can sense that shit is not over, actually. That shit is ramping up. So, and poor Henkel, he's reacting, but he doesn't know what's going on. He just sort of like jumps back and looks down at his feet because he can feel that something is coming up through the ground, but he doesn't really know what it is. So, anyway, this is the point where Izumi and Sig take their leave of the rest of the group. And Armstrong thanks them both for saving their lives. Then we get the overhead view of the city being triggered and all of that like blue light. And then that light like kind of, I'm trying to think of the word to describe it. It sort of shoots outward and goes from blue to purple. And as it turns purple, we get those weird little shadow hands. And the shadow hands begin to completely break apart all of the like remaining men that were inside the circle with Goldtooth. And then eyes open underneath Izumi and Ed and Al, and all of a sudden the little shadow hands come out and start to essentially disassemble them. And I know I have said already how totally dope looking it is that they break up into these little rectangles, but I need to just reiterate, it is so much creepier than to just have them break apart. Like in the style of like they turn to dust or something. First of all, we've already seen that with the homunculi, so it would sort of not be super effective to just do the same thing. And secondly, the same thing isn't happening to them as what was happening to the homunculi, so it wouldn't make sense for it to be the same thing. But it looks almost like they're being broken down to individual pixels of animation. It's like, almost feels like referential somehow. And there's a sense of like the building blocks of life. I don't know. There's a lot about how this happens that not only makes it look creepier, but also does give the impression of, but they can be put back together again, which I think is really difficult to get across and really interesting to watch. So gradually, each one of them just disappears. And we even have a moment where Armstrong was shaking hands with Izumi, and Armstrong is still holding onto Izumi's hand, and her hand begins to dissipate in hers. And I really appreciated getting to see that, because I was sort of wondering, like, if somebody tried to physically hold you back, I have no doubt it wouldn't make a difference. But also, like, would it affect them? And I found it really interesting that she's literally touching somebody who's vanishing, and it affects her not at all. And I didn't think it would, because that's not really the point, but, you know, who knows? I'm not sure how precise all of this is. So the thing that is really fascinating too is that after they each get broken down, and of course, Ed is the last one to go. We see Al first on the street just disappear into seemingly like thin air. Then we have Izumi on the stairs. Then we have Ed down with Goldtooth guy. As they get broken apart, the eye that opened up at their feet winks shut. And I really like that. There's just something about it. Just real creepy, you know? Excuse me, I'm sorry, guys. I haven't even, I drank a sip of water before I started the recording. And apparently my body just can't handle sips of water anymore. It's too old. But, yeah, that's how the fucking episode ended. And I will tell you what, kids, I was real pissed. I was real mad about it. It's just, they're packing so much in to every episode, first of all, that I have no right to be annoyed. But second of all, damn, right there, that's where you're going to leave me? That's mean. That's just mean-spirited. I'm just saying. So, anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. But thank you guys very much for coming and hanging out with me in the chat. And thank you also to Max for commissioning this series, of course. Hope you guys are enjoying the coverage. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.